opportunistic outlet, not for procreation, but an energy releaser. This is especially so if children resemble her. This is another curious thing, children should always resemble the father, as testosterone is a stronger medium than estrogen, and in our ancient times this was more so. It was an abomination if the children did not resemble the father. It is a known fact that healthy women produce nothing but males. And today's imbalance of more girls than boys is more evidence of malnutrition and androgyny. Remember the carnate women? Boys born often fail to survive today. Which brings us to another falsehood that states women are superior because they suffer from a great deal less of disease than males. This is very wrong. Women suffer much more, but this women's liberation propaganda is being scooped up by many gullible anthropologists. It is just that man in the past seldom suffered from the harrowing ailments he does today. Ashley Montagu in his book The Natural Superiority of Women failed to realize the gynandromate problem. True, males suffer a great deal and the babies abort more, but has anyone stopped to think that it takes a great deal more nutrients to create a male than a female? These organisms have to be built of more sturdy material, for life demands of them stronger body and mental attributes, which all demands a well-nourished mother with clean habits, and it also takes one who is not herself androgynous. When not well nourished, she gives birth to something we call a female, part eugenic, part andric. It has become customary today among academia, particularly of the evolutionary set, the boys and girls who sell out when they cannot figure things out, to downplay men. They are selling out this gender at WL5 wholesale prices. What a shame. They do not even know what a masculine or feminine is. The book Why Males Exist is a typical example. I'm wondering why academia exists. All that our college-level people seem to offer is the transposing of their own weakness into their historical and biological tableaus of man. The recipe for creating a feminine baby was quite simple to the ancients. They knew she needed the father's strong genetic qualities, but not his hormones, and would take certain herbs to combat the male hormones. There is also a trick we know. Animals play to create whatever gender they believe is needed, and in the wild will orientate themselves to the geomagnetic south for males and the north for genixas. Will plants, as a definite correlation between the magnetic poles and gender has been established. We always see how the ancient peoples would only mate on certain phases of the moon, for this too will have an effect as well as planetary bodies, because of the electromagnetic fields. 10 years ago, or so, you could not make a statement like this, but research in these areas of biostrategy or bioastronomy, as some prefer, are becoming more clear. Clitoridectomies can be very hazardous if not done properly, and if there are many male features involved. Egyptians did it around 20 years of age in the early dynasties, males as well, and at 6 in the later dynasties, which is an excellent guideline to their degeneration as puberty lowered. Puberty will be at roughly 6-9 years in America in 20 years or so, although many girls are having menarche at 9 or 10 now. In the Sudan, it is still practiced, as with many other African tribes, and interestingly there are two kinds, the Taharat Sunnah, purification of the law, and more revealingly, the Taharat Farahin, the purification of the pharaohs. The former is removal of clitoris and labia minora, and in the second surgery, 2/3 of the labia majora are removed also, and it was said to be that practice by the ancient Egyptians. To be called the son of an uncut woman was a great insult. Infibulation was also practiced, which does not seem to be an Egyptian practice but a later addition to thwart premarital relations. Nonetheless, they know what would produce a healthy baby and what would not. If they got into the hands of a bad surgeon, however, this was a drawback. It is often done in the hope it will preserve their virginity, as the vagina is sometimes partly closed and reopened at marriage, but as this is their answer to Western culture's pill, it is a poor substitute for good character. A clitoris is difficult for a woman who has retained feminine instincts, but on some it is merely rudimentary with no feeling at all. All higher primates have it also, but we cannot regard them as normal in nature, for they, like the female hyena, who is almost unrecognizable from the male, have a large clitoris, and the latter animal cited as another aberration of nature by the Egyptians. Wherever there is blood engorgement, there is always a drain on her heart, which is quite literally a real killer, and it's no wonder we see women aging as rapidly as they do. Males suffer more heart attacks, but women have what is termed silent heart attacks that are just beginning to be studied, as she may not realize she is having one until a major attack or stroke, which are more common in women. In one of the most ill-researched books to come around, The Sex Contract, of course from an evolutionary anthropologist, Helen Fisher, reports that the Polynesians of Mango Island teach their young girls to spasm several times. I wish she would have looked into the matter more thoroughly, as all Polynesian people did not commence these abnormal practices until Western diets invaded the islands. This is a matter of record, as Dr. Price revealed, and many others since the days of Captain Cook. She also reported on the inhabitants of a rural Irish island, where neither man or woman had in 1966 ever heard of it. They do not know how lucky they had been, until some egghead spilled the beans, and now they have an island of neurotics, thinking they are abnormal because someone put this bee in their Irish Thames. Again, if she had bothered to look, she would have seen they were little bothered by Western diets. Her book is most damaging and an insult to thorough research. I do get a kick out of how she finally admits it may be hazardous to conception, but what the heck, it's evolution, it's satisfying to women, she says. That's right, forget it. Produces unhealthy offspring, that it ages women tremendously. What about the headaches many have for days from all the blood that engorges the head? And creates a mountain of gynecological problems. She just proved the hopelessness of evolution. For I dare say, if her hominids were thinking like this, it's no wonder they became extinct. Infertility is a direct consequence of it. Had she done her research well, 9, she would have found that most primitive societies who have vital Western influence have coitus in the most quiet manner possible, as they know that it is injurious to mother and conceptus. Here is an excellent example of sex as an energy release, and not for procreation, just two degraded organisms coming together for cytocidal purposes. How could evolution result from a woman pouring forth her every energy at a time she needs it most to create a life? If this is what is coming out of higher education, no thank you. Books as this are only making more problems. They add nothing, only take away. A study was done several years ago in which a group of women, some dressed in pants, and the others as they should be in dresses, and a group of men were brought together to see who would be the wallflowers. As would be guessed, as you look at Androgynous America, the men preferred the women dressed as their feminine side fell in love with the women's masculine traits. Genic men always fear a true genic because they cannot respond to true femininity. Men too have difficult problems coping with their feminine sides. They too have two major physical flaws, mammillary papilla and a prepuce. The former will be discussed later, but the latter is as the problem of a woman's clitoris, a result of their having in the first weeks of gestation a urethra opening as a female which closes by 12 weeks. The prepuce seems to be leftover tissue that would have gone to close the urogenital membrane very early in gestation, as the scrotal raphe should have occurred at this time instead of at 12 weeks. About 1/5 of men have a short prepuce and a very small minority are born without it. It has always been the belief in Jewish and Islamic ritual that eventually circumcised babies will be born, and this small minority does occur more in those practicing it. However, the key is to accompany it with a pure diet, by both husband and wife, and such a baby can be born. You could call this Lamarckism, which it is true, but to achieve it takes the proper ingredients. This is why evolution is a farce and nothing is genetically geared as such to resist alteration back to its original formation. Evolution is rather like astrology. If you allow yourself to fall to the negative forces of nature, you will change, for the worse. All the patriarchs were said to have been born circumcised, and as it is mentioned so often, we must believe this was the normal state of man at one time. Circumcision is becoming less popular in the US today, while Hebraic and Islamic peoples carry on the tradition. There is probably no bigger issue misconstrued among Gentiles than this one, and unfortunately, most of those practicing it do not realize the biological importance of it. Concentrating on the religious aspects. Among the Islams it is performed around age 10, 14, however, among Jews it is done on the 8th day after birth, the Bri Milah. I am quite against the latter being done to a newborn, as it is a terrible trauma, which is why most ancient peoples as the Egyptians waited until puberty is due. Islam's no anesthesia is used on babies, and after the ceremony Jewish tradition gives the baby a little wine, which is an awfully poor and hazardous move there, and one can imagine the effects all this has on the psyche of the child, for it will surely affect later life. However, in Judaism, more attention is paid to the surgical aspects, and a good mohel is better than a surgeon with less trauma on the baby. Mortality rules are practically non-existent among them, while Islamic practices cannot boast of same. Many African tribes have practiced it, as well as some South 8, 10 Sea Island peoples, all evidence of their links with Egypt. From Egypt we do have reliefs showing it. Its advantage as being a prophylactic against penile carcinomas is a matter of record, as it is very rare in those practicing it. It has also been shown that there is a low rate of cervical cancer in women whose husbands are circumcised. It was Abraham's covenant with God to have his people circumcised to propagate the seed. The part everyone fails to acknowledge is the biological machinations involved here. In uncircumcised men they lose the tactile sensation, and erection is slower and harder to achieve, and in effect they create harm to themselves, and in particular to the woman, which is why cervical cancer is prevalent. Cervical cancer is caused by bacterial mixing by having more than one mate and/or injury during coitus. The prepuce does not allow, by the way the clitoris has a prepuce, 2, for the proper chemical and organ stimulation to occur, for under it is a sebaceous secretion called the smegma, a thick cheesy odoriferous substance. Even the clitoris has it. It comes from Tyson's glands, which act to keep bacteria from harming either partner, hence cancer and other diseases are not apt to occur. Rama knew what he was doing. Lo, have his people circumcised, for only biologically stable infants can be born, but only if the full complement of the regimen is completed. Good diet and the proprieties with less effort and harm, an egg has a better chance to secure safety in the womb. The covenant was not with Abraham or Indra as we know him. Circumcision is found in nearly all my mummies until the New Kingdom. The oldest known is from a tomb-based relief at Saqqara and dates from the VLTH dynasty, and is performed by a priest of the Ka. Many African tribes such as the Pygmies The Bantu of the Congo and the Maasai have it done at ages 10-20. In the Lenda tribe it is done at 7 or 8 and the skin is buried with care in the ground. Some West Coast tribes perform it at 12 days after birth. Some cannot be chiefs unless circumcised, much like Maasai law. Agnostic text tells us that the male organ is likely annal of mysteries. It is a wellspring and hair comes out from it, thereby the senses are held. For it is a great mystery to Tlias who perform its function, who erect it in purity and not low excess. As for those who deprave it, they are cast frontly high dawn lower. Idly knows the limit of the worlds. The eye is not opened which builds all worlds, their eyes are das jedwaj they behold them note. So, when you release seed and have been orderly in the act and it's found fell upon the mystery of the womb within her, which is responsive lo it. Seed and blood love one another and seek their vehicle, a soul, a body, and a vital spirit. And by them kings and regents, yea and the whole world, are created. And so when they approach one another, soul and spirit rejoice at that mystery. As the male seed neared the mystery of the womb, the soul rejoiced and addressed a hymn to it and said, in the name of the great life, who today thinks of the great life, when more emphasis is placed on self-appeasement and not the creation of a healthy baby? To the ancients, procreation meant the gift of life. Today, erotism is the harbinger of death as it has been since these rhymes. Throughout the Egyptian, Sumerian and the texts, some of the gods are constantly referred to as being two-faced, a Janus, and usually sexual aberration is implied. Why? Had they realized the degeneration? Today, they would not even recognize what 8-11 we call a female as anything normal. As we know today, proven by photographs, most people have a female and male side to their faces which the ancients certainly imply. Split personalities certainly accompany androgyny. Androgyny has certainly been the success and worldly hypnotic fascination of Christ, whose long hair and robes were much frowned upon by ancient Hebrews who at that time wore pants and short hair, still struggling to hold on to their Nibiruian ways, as we will see. The more androgynous people became, the more Christ and other heavily androgynous people looked intriguing to them. It is the most hypnotic sensation there is and captures every culture that allows its germplasms to falter through improper diet and lifestyle. Christ's asexual tendencies cannot be denied by any who are well read of all ancient literature. His hypnotic manner and appearance appeals to the latent, dormant tendencies such as this in androgynous people. To put it candidly, his attraction lies in the feet. His male side is attractive to the feminine side of man and his feminine to the masculine sides of women. There is no Hebrew in the world who should hang their head in shame of the crucifixion, for these people were among the few to see through the one God's evil doings. Androgyny was a most serious problem then, and many may find it hard